Culture's never really static, is it? It's more like a river, constantly flowing with new ideas. And today, we're going to jump right into that river. We're charting an incredible 8,000 years of history on the Indian subcontinent. We're talking from the very first farms all the way to massive, magnificent empires. So let's dive in. Okay, so when you're looking at a history this huge, where do you even begin? 8,000 years. Well, you start with a map. And for us, this timeline is our map. Right now, it's empty. Just a huge blank canvas stretching from the Stone Age all the way to the early medieval period. We're about to fill it in, bit by bit, and watch as one of the world's oldest and most fascinating civilizations comes to life. All right, first stop. Our story, like so many great stories of civilization, kicks off right by the water, by a river, because this is where humanity on the subcontinent made its first, giant leap, moving from just scattered little settlements into honest-to-goodness, organized, sprawling cities. So let's pinpoint where it all begins. We're talking way back, around 7,000 BCE at a place called Mehrgarh. Now, this spot is a huge deal. Why? Because it's one of the first places we see people making that massive shift from being nomadic hunter-gatherers to settling down and farming. And you got to understand, this wasn't just about planting a few seeds. No, this was the absolute foundation for everything that was about to come. And what came next was absolutely monumental. Let's jump forward a few thousand years on our timeline. We land in the Harappan civilization. This was the subcontinent's first urban culture. And look, we're not talking about a few huts clustered together anymore. Oh no. We are talking about some of the world's first, and get this, meticulously planned cities. And when I say planned, I mean planned. This is the stuff that just blows my mind. These weren't just ancient cities, they were like blueprints for a modern metropolis. I'm talking advanced town planning, streets laid out in a grid, sophisticated drainage systems that honestly would put some modern ones to shame. They had massive public buildings like the famous Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro. And they weren't cut off from the world either. They were traders with routes stretching all the way to Mesopotamia. And the craziest part? They left behind a whole written language that to this day, nobody can read. What a mystery. So the Harappan cities eventually declined, and that's a whole mystery in itself, but the subcontinent didn't just fade to black, not at all. Instead, something new started to bubble up, a whole new era of ideas. You could call it a spiritual revolution, and it was one that would go on to shape the culture for literally thousands of years. Okay, let's jump forward to our next major stop, the Vedic Age. This period brings in new groups of people, pastoral societies who spoke Indo-European languages. You'll often hear them called Aryans. They're the ones who composed the Rig Veda, which is one of the oldest religious texts in the entire world. Their spiritual life really centered on worshiping nature and performing these really elaborate fire sacrifices, or yajnas, that were led by a priestly class. Now, as this Vedic society grew and changed, a really structured social order started to form. It became known as the Varna system, and it was pretty rigid. Think of it like a pyramid. Right at the very top, you had the Brahmins, the priests. They were the ones who knew all the rituals. Then came the Kshatriyas, who were the warriors and the kings. Below them, the Vaishyas, your merchants and farmers. And at the bottom were the Shudras, the laborers. This system became a foundational part of society, shaping people's lives for a very, very long time. Okay, so whenever you have a system that rigid, you're bound to get some pushback, right? And that's exactly what happened. New ideas, new philosophies started to pop up, directly challenging the old ways. People started saying, hey, instead of all these complex rituals and sacrifices, what about ahimsa, or nonviolence? And while the Varna system was all about division, new paths like Jainism and Buddhism opened their doors to everyone, no matter what caste they were born into. This was a radical shift in thinking. So all this new thinking, this spiritual revolution, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. At the same time, the political landscape was just as chaotic. The whole subcontinent was basically this patchwork of kingdoms, all fighting with each other. But a couple of things, some new tech and some big threats from the outside, were about to force all that chaos into something totally new. Something we call an empire. 16. What's with the number 16? Well, that's how many major kingdoms, or Mahajanapadas, were on the map around the 6th century BCE. They were popping up everywhere, partly thanks to new iron tools that let them clear forests and expand farming. And of course, they were all fighting each other for control. The stage was basically set for a royal rumble where one kingdom would eventually come out on top. So what does it take to get a bunch of squabbling kingdoms to unite? Usually, a common enemy. And that's what they got, a threat from the outside. First, you have invasions from Persia, and then the big one, the Greeks, led by Alexander the Great. Now, these invasions brought new ideas and culture, for sure, but more importantly, they created this urgent need for a unified defense. It was basically a get it together or get conquered moment. And the answer to that threat? The Mauryan Empire. This is it. Founded by an absolute genius of a strategist named Chandragupta Maurya, this was India's first great empire. For the very first time, almost the entire subcontinent was brought together under one rule, one powerful central government, a total game changer. Now, the most famous Mauryan ruler, by far, was Chandragupta's grandson Ashoka, and his story is incredible. He started out as a conqueror, but after this one horrific, bloody war in a place called Kalinga, something in him just snapped. He had this complete change of heart. He basically gave up violent conquest and adopted a new policy he called Dhammavijaya, which means conquest not by the sword, but by peace and doing right. And he wasn't quiet about it. He had his new philosophy carved into giant stone pillars and rocks all across his empire for everyone to read. Okay, so after the Mauryan Empire eventually faded and things broke up into smaller kingdoms for a while, another great age of unity came along. And this one is often called a golden age. Why? Because it was just this unbelievable explosion of art, science, and culture. This was the time of the Gupta dynasty. And man, did they preside over a peak in civilization. Just listen to this list. This is the era that gave the world the number 0. Think about that, the foundation of modern math. It's when the stunning paintings in the Ajanta caves were created. They built world-class universities like Nalanda that attracted scholars from all over Asia. It's when modern Hinduism, with the worship of gods like Vishnu and Shiva, really took shape. Oh, and they also minted some of the most gorgeous gold coins you will ever see. Just an incredible time. But hold on, it's really easy to focus just on what was happening in the north. But that's not the whole story, not by a long shot. While the Guptas were having their golden age up north, down in the south, totally separate and powerful cultures were flourishing. They were building their own incredible legacies in things like sea trade, literature, and especially architecture. Just take a look at their temples. You have the Pallava dynasty, who were masters at carving entire shrines, whole buildings straight out of a single massive piece of rock. Just mind-boggling. And then, building on that legacy, you have the Cholas, who took it to the next level. They started constructing these towering, incredibly detailed temples, like the famous Brihadeshwara temple. It's still standing today, and it's just an absolute monument to their skill as engineers and artists. And just like that, our timeline is full. Take a look. Now you can see the whole journey we've been on. You can see the arc of the story, can't you? It starts with little settlements that grow into incredible cities. Then those cities spark a revolution in ideas. Those ideas then shape the conscience of massive empires. And those empires, in turn, provide the peace and stability needed for a golden age of art and science to bloom. What an amazing, rich, and complex history. So here's the most important takeaway from all of this. This isn't just ancient history. It's not locked away in a book. The idea of zero, the philosophy of nonviolence, all of that incredible art, it's all part of a living, breathing cultural DNA that's still shaping India and really the entire world today. Which of course leaves us with one big question to ponder. What's the next chapter going to look like?